A few days ago, I watched a episode of the All In podcast, and one of the co-hosts of that podcast, David Friedberg, said something really insightful about artificial intelligence. He pointed out that AI isn't something that you just turn on and then suddenly it manages and optimizes your business for you. Instead, he pointed out that the real challenge now is figuring out how to integrate AI into your processes, your systems, and overall organization. Let me play the clip and then I'm going to respond.
But I think there's kind of three big trends underway that are worth noting. The first is that there's a realization now that you need to pair humans and human engineering with the generative tools that these generative AI systems are providing. So you can get a bunch of code written, but you still need to debug the code. You still need to get it into production. You still need to get it to integrate. So this kind of pairing of humans with AI is something that's being learned. What's the right model? It's not that you just turn on generative AI and it runs your business for you. It's like, where does it fit in the org? Who are the people that run it? How do they use it, et cetera?
What Friedberg said here is really insightful. And to kind of drive the point home, let me sort of rephrase or re-emphasize what's going on. A lot of executives and entrepreneurs are making a mistake with AI. Many people think that AI is plug and play. That's not the case. To some large extent, integrating AI into a business is an engineering problem. It's an engineering problem to the extent that you have to engineer individual AI systems to perform very specific tasks, but it's also, to a large extent, it's going to be an organizational engineering problem, which means mapping and redesigning workflows, re-engineering roles in organizations, and also engineering it in such a way that you're doing change management because a lot of people are very nervous about AI. With all of that said, to kind of frame things up, I want to give you 8 points and tips to help you as you start thinking about integrating AI into your own business. Okay, number 1, AI integration is an engineering problem. I already suggested this and noted this just a minute ago, but I kind of want to put this as the first main point. Think about it this way. Your business is like a machine, and currently most businesses are machines that combine human beings and various forms of technology. Integrating AI is going to be very similar. You are still going to have human beings, and you're still going to have technology. It's just that you're going to have a new type of technology alongside all of the other ones. Artificial intelligence in all of its different forms. I'm going to talk about a couple of different forms in a second, but the main point here is you're going to need to think about how to engineer your business machine. What parts do you need? What roles? Which ones are going to be human? Which ones will be technology? Which ones will be AI agents or maybe other types of artificial intelligence? How will those things be wired together in a way that produces revenue, profit, and ultimately business value? Okay, point number 2, you need to choose the right tool for every particular problem. So if you want to use AI, you can't think about it as one thing. This is something that I've been talking about a lot in recent videos, and I think it's going to be a very common refrain across my content for a very long time. Many people think that AI means generative AI, something like ChatGPT. That's not the case. There are multiple different types of artificial intelligence. ChatGPT and generative AI is really one major type. You also have supervised learning, aka predictive models. You have unsupervised learning, which finds patterns or structure in data. This is very good for strategic purposes. You have AI agents, which will enable us to automate certain types of work. They're not quite ready yet. They don't work very well exactly right now, but we are developing AI agents and systems that can do some types of low-level repetitive work. And even still, there are other types of AI that I'm kind of not mentioning, like computer vision, which is kind of a form of supervised learning, but it's maybe its own little thing, and a variety of other things. So when you're using AI in your business, you have to first think about the problems that you're trying to solve and the goals that you're trying to accomplish. And then once you've identified the goals and problems, then you choose the right AI tool or technique. So AI is like a toolkit. It's not like one single thing. This, by the way, is exactly how top-tier companies think and how they use technology. I have worked at a FAANG company. I have worked at many very technologically sophisticated corporations, and they think through the problem that they're trying to solve, and they know enough about the various tools that they know how to connect the right tool to a particular problem. Point number 3, for large language models, context engineering is king. So let me explain. Now, a second ago, I just mentioned that there are multiple different types of AI, but the one that everyone's really excited about right now is large language models. If you're using a large language model, everyone's been talking about prompt engineering, but the real key to getting good outputs is context engineering. Now, context engineering includes writing a good prompt, but it also includes adding everything else that the large language model will need to produce an accurate and useful output. That includes things like a detailed explanation of the task you're trying to accomplish, maybe a history of the problem, what you've tried, what's worked, what hasn't. This often includes things like documents, other types of background knowledge about the problem that might otherwise be missing. You often need in the prompt, you need to specify an output format or a structure, limitations or constraints on the output. So the better you can engineer not just the prompt itself, but the whole context around that prompt, the better your outputs are going to be. I think that context engineering is going to become very important, and a lot of people are going to start talking about it probably within the next few months. Some very smart people have already started talking about context engineering. This also, by the way, it's one of the reasons why you're going to need to think about vector stores and document stores, RAG databases, and other databases, which leads us into my next point. Point number 4, you need data. Many people are forgetting about this because they're so used to thinking about AI as being equivalent to ChatGPT or a large language model. They go to Claude or ChatGPT, type in a question, it gives an answer. Now, as I already said, it can often be very helpful if you're using even a large language model. It can be helpful to have things like documents or a history of the problem, other relevant context. Those in and of themselves are types of data. And those types of data, like documents put into vector databases, RAG systems, things like that, those types of data are really good for large language models. So if you have a problem that can be solved with an LLM, you're going to have those types of data. But if you have a different type of problem and you need to make a very accurate prediction about something, you'll use supervised learning. Supervised learning needs its own types of data, and that data often needs to be relatively clean. And in some cases, you're going to need a lot of it. So you need to start thinking about the types of data that you have. And like I said earlier, you often need, even before that, to think about the types of problems you need to solve. So you start with the problem, figure out the potential solutions or tools that you can use to solve that problem, and then figure out the data that you're going to need. And if you don't have it, start collecting it. This is not optional. I'll also add for things like AI agents, which I said earlier kind of aren't ready for prime time. But to the extent that we can get agents to work well, you often need to train and tune agents. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. But guess what? Training and tuning require data. So data is not optional. You need to start thinking about this. And if you don't understand enough about data, data acquisition, data cleanliness, general data readiness, you need to learn more about that. It will help you a lot as you start thinking about how to use AI in your company. Next, tip number 5. This one I call map workflows, then automate and optimize. So by this, what I actually mean is in order to use AI, and AI in all of its forms, whether that's predictive models or large language model systems, RAG systems, AI agents, you should probably start mapping out your workflows first. As I said previously, you often need to figure out what problems you're trying to solve. And to do that, as a step on the way of doing that, it can be helpful to start mapping your workflows, figuring out the types of work that humans are doing. And then as you become more familiar with different types of artificial intelligence, you can figure out what tasks should be human only, what tasks might be fully automatable or optimizable using artificial intelligence, which type of artificial intelligence you want to slot in, and which parts of your business are places where you might be able to use AI to kind of augment or enhance part of the process, but maybe you'll still need a human in the loop. So it can be very helpful to sort of map out all of your processes and systems and workflows. Many of the best businesses before the AI era were doing this. They were mapping out their processes and creating standard operating procedures, SOPs. I think this is going to be extremely important in the AI era, especially in this kind of first phase as people try and figure out how to re engineer and reorganize their companies to use AI to maximum effect. Tip number 6, you probably are going to need to train or tune systems. Let me explain. So, certainly in terms of classical AI systems, things like predictive models, you're going to need to know how to train those systems to make good predictions. This is really just classic machine learning training. This is a skill in and of itself, but because supervised learning, these predictive models, they can be so powerful and useful for certain types of problems. Learning a little bit about this or having someone in your business that knows how to do this, this can be extremely useful. Now, setting aside supervised learning and predictive models, if you're also talking about large language models and even AI agents, you're still probably going to need to train or tune a model a little bit if you're using it inside of a workflow. So certainly if you're just going to ChatGPT and asking it for advice, you probably don't need to do this. But if you're using a large language model or an AI agent as part of a workflow, many people are finding out that these systems don't work particularly well right out of the box. As I said previously, they're not exactly plug and play. How do you make them better? You actually can train these systems. If you know what you're doing, you can train them or tune them up a little bit so that they understand your workflow better. So they understand your processes, so they understand your data, so they understand the types of outputs that you expect and need, so they understand the tools that you're using. If you're giving, for example, an AI agent access to an API or other tool, in many cases, you're going to have to train the agent to use that tool a little bit. This maybe should be unsurprising. If you hire a human and you need a human to do a very specific task in your business, you can hire somebody with a college degree who's relatively intelligent. And guess what? You almost always still need to train the human being to work specifically on your task with your specific tools. You need to train humans too. It's a very similar thing with AI systems. I think going forward, especially with AI agents, but certainly also with classic supervised learning and predictive models, training and tuning will be key for getting excellent results that really drive outcomes in your business. Next, number 7, validation and quality assurance are mandatory. So this goes back to the main point that I'm trying to make is that AI integration is a type of engineering. Many people are kind of forgetting they're using AI and thinking they can just kind of hack something together in a long weekend and then have it work really well in their business. But because they have more of a hacker's mindset as opposed to an engineer's mindset, they're forgetting about things like checking the outputs, checking how things work, setting up systems to monitor over time. This is critical for classic engineering, like software engineering. You often have validation and testing and monitoring systems. In fact, many software engineering methodologies are centered around testing. This is going to be very similar in the AI era, but testing and engineering and quality assurance, they do operate a little bit differently. Traditional software is deterministic, so you can test it in a particular way. You write the tests, you put in an input, it's supposed to produce an output. If it doesn't, there's something wrong and you go back and fix it. Large language models are a little bit different. They are probabilistic in nature. They hallucinate. They can very confidently say that something is true when in fact it's false. They can often produce answers that are somewhat close, but maybe a little bit imprecise. If you're working in an area where you need to make very precise outputs, that can be a big problem. So you need to find ways of measuring and validating and doing QA on the outputs of these systems and then setting up systems to monitor that over time. Oh, and there's actually one other thing. Most machine learning and classic AI and then modern AI systems, they quote unquote drift over time. This is a very well-known phenomenon in classic machine learning and predictive model systems but it also happens with certain types of AI and LLM systems, and in particular, AI agents. What drift is when you have something, you measure its performance, it performs very well right now, but then over time, the system starts to kind of drift away a little bit. So let's say this is like your true north, and then over time, it starts to perform worse and worse, and it drifts off course. You need systems to monitor the outputs to make sure that that model drift isn't happening. Or if it does, you need systems that can catch it so you can go back and re-engineer or retrain the system to tune it up a little bit. This is absolutely critical. This is a huge part of AI engineering, and it's a huge part of building systems that are accurate and precise and operate inside of your business to drive revenue, profit, and business value over the long term. And finally, number 8, AI implementation is going to require organizational design as well as change management. So many organizations are probably going to need to be redesigned to integrate AI systems into workflows and processes. For very large organizations, they're going to be redesigned, but some smaller organizations will simply be built with this in mind from the start. The first major part of this is thinking about how roles change. Individuals, I think, are going to need a lot more skill in working with AI. That includes writing good prompts, doing context engineering, but it might also include things like training or tuning models and then validating their outputs. I think in many ways, for the individual worker, working with AI in these ways is going to be sort of like what Excel has been in the last 2 or 3 decades. Almost everybody needs to use Excel these days, and everyone has varying amounts of skill using Excel spreadsheets. I think something very similar is going to happen with AI, where you're going to have varying amounts of skill in individual roles, varying amounts of skill with using AI, prompting, context engineering, model training, validation, etc. But I do think it's going to be an increasingly large part of many, if not most, roles in most organizations. A little more specifically, I also think that many organizations are going to need a chief AI officer, CIO. A chief AI officer, I think, is going to be in the next decade or two, very similar to what a CTO has been in the last 2 or 3 decades. Almost every major business, certainly technology businesses, but banks, insurance companies, media companies, almost everyone these days has a chief technology officer because technology has become so deeply integrated into how most modern businesses work. Something very similar, I think, is going to happen now in the AI era. I think that AI is going to become so deeply integrated into how most businesses work over the next decade or two that most companies will need a chief AI officer to help consult inside the org with different executives and leaders and help those executives and leaders inside the organization implement AI in the right ways. This role is going to require, as I've sort of suggested already, a lot of knowledge about data and data readiness, different types of AI, how to use them to solve problems and drive outcomes. So I think CIOs, chief AI officers, are going to become very important as we re-engineer organizations in this new era. Speaking of reorganizing organizations, I think this is going to require a lot of change management. People, I think, are very afraid of AI. Some of this is because of all of the doomerism that's appeared in media and news talking about how AI is going to take everyone's job. I don't think that's true. A lot of smart people have said that that's not going to happen. Even Elon Musk said, if it happens, it's going to take a couple of decades. Other people like Balaji Srinivasan, the former CTO of Coinbase, a famous Silicon Valley entrepreneur, he has said that we're going to use AI to augment human beings, and that a lot of work, as I've suggested in this video, is going to come around context engineering, QA, validation, process engineering, architecture design, things like that. So I do think that there's going to be work for human beings going forward in these AI-centric businesses, but there's going to be a lot of change management required to help people get very comfortable if they're in an organization that has not used a lot of technology or AI in the past. They might be very fearful of it. Now, to go back to the All In podcast episode that I talked about at the beginning of this video, In that same video, Chamath Palihapitiya, one of the other co-hosts of that podcast, said that he had recently created a business that has been doing some AI work and AI integration work with other companies. And with one of their first clients, they were actually fired. Why? Because the further down they went in that business, trying to integrate AI, the more pushback they got from the employees. What he said and what I'm saying here is that change management will be crucial for helping people change their roles, skill up, and helping them get comfortable working side by side with AI systems. One more point that I'll leave you with here. Ray Dalio, a very famous hedge fund manager, investor, he said in his book Principles that management is organizational engineering. And he even went as far as to say that it's engineering organizations consisting of humans and technology. So what I'm saying here is really kind of an extension of that. We are moving into an era where AI is probably going to be deeply integrated and embedded in many corporations and companies. So now the task is engineering organizations as teams of humans and AIs and processes. To wrap this up, understand that when people say that AI is going to automate everything and take away everyone's jobs, realize that they are sort of misunderstanding the challenge. The companies that win aren't going to be those that bolt ChatGPT onto everything. The real winners are going to be those who can engineer AI systems technically that can re-architect their organizations, but can also manage the cultural change required so that humans and AIs can work together to drive business outcomes. What do you think? Are you interested in AI engineering? Are you interested in learning more about the technical aspects, or maybe more of the organizational and cultural aspects? Have you struggled with this inside of your own business? I want to hear from you. Leave a comment.